If you are a Nigerian graduate, or if you have a child who is about to finish university, or if you are in the diaspora and you have a sibling or a cousin, the Federal Executive Council approved the biggest change to the National Youth Service Corps since it was created in 1973. 53 years. That is how long NYSC has been running in almost exactly the same way. And in one FEC meeting, the Tinubu administration changed almost everything about it. The khaki uniform that every Nigerian graduate has worn since 1973 is gone. It is being replaced with Adire fabric. The 3-week orientation camp is gone. It is now 6 weeks. The passing out parade that your parents attended and their parents attended is gone. It is being replaced with a graduation ceremony. Random postings to states that had nothing to do with what you studied are supposed to be ending. And there are 11 brand new career streams that every future corps member will have to choose from before they even arrive at camp. 11 streams ranging from medical corps to tech and digital corps to legal corps to green corps. Now, the government is telling Nigerians this is the best thing that has ever happened to NYSC, that it will fix the employability crisis, that it will make service year actually useful, that no graduate will leave NYSC the same way they entered. But here is what the government is not telling you. The reforms are approved, but they are not yet law. The NYSC Act has not been amended. The camps do not yet have the facilities to support 6 weeks of structured training, and the 77,000 naira monthly allowance that corps members survive on has not changed. And there are very serious questions about whether a reform this ambitious can actually be executed in a country where NYSC camps in some states still lack electricity and running water. This video is going to give you every detail of what is changing, what is staying the same, and most importantly, the questions the government has not answered that every Nigerian family needs to ask before they celebrate. If you are new to Pulse Nigeria HQ, this channel exists to give Nigerians the kind of honest analysis that goes beyond the government's press releases. Subscribe now and stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what these NYSC reforms mean for your family. Every single thing that is changing about NYSC. Let us go through every change that the Federal Executive Council approved on June 29. I am going to give you all 9 of them clearly, and then we are going to talk about what they actually mean in practice. Change number 1 is the leadership structure. For the first time in the 53-year history of NYSC, the scheme will be led by a civilian director general instead of a military officer. 3 executive directors will support that civilian DG. One of them will specifically oversee military operations and security, because the military is not being removed from NYSC entirely. It is just being removed from the top operational position. Change number 2 is the orientation camp duration. What has been a 3-week camp since 1973 is now becoming a 6-week program. It is broken into 3 phases of 2 weeks each. The first 2 weeks cover civic responsibility, national values, and leadership. The second 2 weeks cover career mapping, financial literacy, business planning, and entrepreneurship, including a structured career day where employers come in to meet corps members. The third 2 weeks deliver stream-specific training based on the career path each corps member has chosen. Change number 4 is the 11 career streams. This is the centerpiece of the whole reform. When a future corps member registers online, they will choose one of 11 streams. The 11 streams are Agri Corps, Medical Corps, Education Corps, Tech and Digital Corps, Legal Corps, Public Service Corps, Infrastructure Corps, Green Corps, Enterprise Corps, Creative Economy Corps, and Paramilitary and Security Corps. Once you choose your stream, you are recognized by that title for your entire service year. Change number 4 is skills-based deployment. This one is significant for parents. Under the old system, a corps member from Lagos could be posted to Zamfara or Borno regardless of the security situation. Under the new system, where security concerns are serious in a particular state, indigents of that state will be given priority for deployment there. If you are from a high-risk area, the government says you can serve closer to home. Change number 6 is full digitization. Registration, mobilization, and call-up processes are moving to a completely digital system. The government says this is designed to reduce administrative delays and improve transparency in how corps members are mobilized and assigned. Change number 7 is the new graduation ceremony. The passing out parade, which has been a fixture of NYSC since 1973, is being scrapped and replaced with a formal professional graduation ceremony. The government says this better reflects the new skills-focused identity of the scheme. Change number 8 is the new uniform. The iconic khaki that every Nigerian graduate has worn since 1973 is being replaced with Adire fabric. The Minister of Youth Development said this decision is specifically intended to support local industries and ensure the government spends money on Nigerian-made products. The Adire uniform will be designed to reflect, in the government's words, professionalism and national pride. Change number 9 is national camp grading. A national grading and certification system is being introduced to standardize orientation camp facilities across all 36 states. The goal is for every state's camp to meet a minimum standard so that corps members in different states have comparable experiences. Now, here is what is not changing. The 1-year service duration remains exactly the same. NYSC is still mandatory for Nigerian graduates under the age of 30. The monthly allowance remains at 77,000 naira. Exemptions for graduates over 30, part-time students, and active military personnel all remain in place. The core mandate of promoting national unity by deploying graduates across state lines is being retained, even as security-sensitive deployment allows for more flexibility. The questions every Nigerian family should be asking right now. Now, let us talk about what the government's press conference did not cover. Because a reform this ambitious, announced in a single FEC meeting with this level of structural change to a 53-year-old institution, raises very serious questions that deserve serious answers. The first and most important question is this: the reforms are approved, but they are not yet law. President Tinubu has directed the Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Youth Development to amend the NYSC Act and other relevant regulations. That process has not yet begun. It requires drafting new legislation, taking it through the National Assembly, committee review, public hearings, and final presidential assent. In a country where legislative processes routinely take months or years, when exactly will these changes actually take legal effect? The second question is about the camps themselves. A 6-week orientation camp with 3 distinct phases of structured training requires infrastructure. It requires classrooms. It requires lecture facilities. It requires career day venues where employers can come in and meet corps members. It requires stream-specific training equipment. Right now, multiple NYSC camps across the country do not have reliable electricity, some do not have adequate running water, some do not have functional accommodation for the current 3-week program. How does the government plan to upgrade all of these facilities to support a program twice as long and significantly more complex before the reform takes effect? The number that nobody mentioned at the press conference. Here is the specific financial detail that was conspicuously absent from every government announcement about this reform. The monthly allowance for corps members remains at 77,000 naira. At the current exchange rate of approximately 1,550 naira to the dollar, 77,000 naira is roughly $50 per month. That is the amount the Nigerian government expects a graduate to live on for an entire year of compulsory national service in a country where food inflation has been above 15% for 2 consecutive years. The reform has 9 changes. The allowance is not one of them, and that absence speaks louder than any of the 9 things the government did announce. The third question is about the 11 career streams and whether employers will actually participate. The reform's promise of skills-based deployment depends entirely on one thing that the government can encourage but cannot mandate: whether enough employers across all 11 sectors, across all 36 states, are actually equipped to take core members on in roles relevant to their chosen stream. Tech graduates need digital hubs to serve at. Medical graduates need functional health institutions. Legal graduates need law firms or judiciary postings. Infrastructure graduates need ongoing construction projects. If the employer network is not ready when the reform takes effect, the stream system becomes a branding exercise with a new name on the same old random posting. The fourth question is about the security-sensitive deployment policy. The minister said core members will be given priority to serve in states where they have local familiarity if security concerns exist. But who decides when security concerns are serious enough to trigger this provision? Is it the governor of the state? Is it the NYSC DG? Is it the National Security Advisor? The policy, as announced, does not specify a clear threshold or decision-making authority. Without a clear threshold, this provision could be applied inconsistently, with some states using it to avoid sending core members to difficult postings and others ignoring it entirely. Is NYSC still worth it, and should it even still exist? Now, let us have the conversation that the government's press conference carefully avoided, because underneath every specific question about camps and allowances and employer networks, there's a much bigger question that Nigerians have been asking since at least 2015, and that this reform does not fully answer. Should NYSC still exist at all? Let me be clear about what I mean by that question. I am not saying it should be abolished tomorrow. I am saying that before we celebrate a reform, we have to honestly ask what we are reforming and why. NYSC was created in 1973 to heal a nation that had just emerged from a brutal civil war. The idea was that young Nigerians from different ethnic groups, religions, and regions would live together for 1 year, build friendships across those lines, and return home as more unified citizens. That was a real and urgent purpose in 1973. In 2026, 53 years later, Nigeria has over 220 million people, an unemployment crisis that affects over 30% of young Nigerians, a brain drain that is stripping the country of its most educated people, a minimum wage that has not kept up with inflation, and a graduate population that often cannot find employment 2 or 3 years after completing service year. In that context, is the primary value of NYSC still national unity, or has it become primarily a 1-year delay in the career of young Nigerians who could be gaining real employment experience during that same period? The Tinubu administration's answer to that question is keep the unity mandate but add employability on top. That is what the 11 streams and the skills-based deployment are designed to do. And that is a reasonable policy position. The question is whether execution can match ambition. The brain drain angle nobody connected to this story missed. Here is the connection that most Nigerian media coverage of this reform missed entirely. One of the stated goals of the NYSC reform is to help curb brain drain by encouraging more graduates to remain invested in local opportunities. The government said this explicitly at the press conference. But here's the tension in that goal. Nigerian graduates who are most likely to japa to leave for the United Kingdom, Canada, or the United States are overwhelmingly the same graduates who are most capable, most employable, and most in demand internationally. The question of whether a more skills-focused NYSC experience will make those graduates choose Nigeria over London or Toronto is a question about the entire economic and governance environment of the country, not just the quality of orientation camp training. A better NYSC experience cannot compete with a UK skilled worker visa if the underlying reasons that graduates are leaving, low salaries, insecurity, poor infrastructure, unstable electricity, remain unchanged. Now, let us talk about the Adire uniform specifically, because I want to give credit where it is genuinely due. The decision to replace khaki with Nigerian-made Adire fabric is one of the most practical and thoughtful decisions in this entire reform package. It directly supports Nigerian textile producers, it promotes a Nigerian cultural product internationally every time a corps member is photographed, and it costs the government nothing extra while creating genuine economic value in the Adire manufacturing sector. That is good policy. It is small in the grand scheme of what NYSC needs, but it is genuinely smart. The civilian leadership change is also genuinely significant. Military operational leadership of what is fundamentally a civilian youth development program has always been a structural oddity. The reform does not remove the military entirely, it retains one executive director for security, but putting a civilian in charge of daily operations makes the scheme more consistent with what it is supposed to be, a national service program, not a paramilitary exercise. Now, drop a comment below right now and tell me, if you have done NYSC, what was your biggest frustration? And if you have not done it yet, what are you most worried about under the new system? I want every answer. Keep watching, because what comes next is the part the government really does not want us talking about. If your child is studying abroad, read this section twice. For Nigerians in the diaspora, this section is specifically for you, because the NYSC reform has implications for children of diaspora Nigerians who are currently studying abroad and who will eventually face the question of whether to return to Nigeria for national service. First, the basics. The eligibility rules have not changed. NYSC remains mandatory for Nigerian graduates under 30, regardless of where they studied. A Nigerian who graduates from the University of London, Howard University, or the University of Toronto at the age of 23 is still legally required to complete NYSC before they can be employed in most Nigerian public sector roles and many private sector roles that require certificates of national service. What the reform potentially changes for diaspora families is the attractiveness of returning. A graduate who comes back from abroad with a technology degree and is interested in contributing to Nigeria's digital economy now has the tech and digital core stream to register under. They could theoretically be deployed to a tech fintech company, a tech hub, or a government digital transformation project rather than being sent to teach mathematics at a rural secondary school with no internet connection. That alignment, if it actually happens in practice, makes NYSC more attractive to diaspora graduates who want to do something meaningful with their service year. But there are two issues that the reform does not address and that diaspora Nigerians need to be honest about. The first is security. The security-sensitive deployment provision is welcome, but it does not eliminate the fundamental risk that corps members face in high insecurity states. Between 2014 and 2025, dozens of NYSC corps members have been killed in attacks, accidents, or security incidents during their service year. A policy that gives priority to indigenes for dangerous postings does not protect non-indigene corps members who still get posted there. Until physical security for corps members across all states is dramatically improved, the security concern for diaspora families sending their children back for NYSC is real and legitimate. The second issue is the allowance, 77,000 naira per month. Roughly $50. For a graduate who has been living in the United Kingdom or the United States and who understands the cost of living in those countries, returning to Nigeria for a year on $50 a month is a financial sacrifice that has nothing to do with patriotism and everything to do with basic arithmetic. The reform's silence on the allowance is not an oversight. Increasing it costs money. And in a government that is already managing a significant fiscal deficit, increasing NYSC allowances for 150,000 corps members per year is a budget line that did not make it into the FEC approval. The honest assessment of whether this reform can succeed. Let us be honest about this. Nigerian institutional reforms have a pattern. They are announced with fanfare. They are praised internationally. They are written into policy documents and legal frameworks, and then implementation exposes the gap between what was promised and what the system can actually deliver. The NYSC reform has genuine merit. The 11 career streams address a real and long-standing problem. The security-sensitive deployment addresses a real and tragic problem. The civilian leadership addresses a real structural inconsistency. These are not cosmetic changes. They are substantive responses to documented complaints that every generation of corps members has raised. The implementation question that will determine everything. Here is the single question that will determine whether this reform succeeds or becomes another Nigerian policy announcement that lives only in a press release. The reform requires employers to participate. 11 career streams mean nothing if there are no employers in those streams ready to take corps members on in relevant roles. The government can build the framework. It cannot force Tier 1 banks, teaching hospitals, law firms, technology companies, and agricultural enterprises to take on corps members in roles that align with their academic backgrounds across 36 states simultaneously. The success of this reform will be measured not at the FEC meeting where it was approved. It will be measured at the moment the first batch of corps members under the new system receives their posting letters and discovers whether the employer network the government promised actually exists in their assigned state. The facilities problem is equally serious. You cannot double the length of orientation camp without doubling the infrastructure capacity. Camps that struggle to accommodate 3 weeks of corps members will need significant investment to handle 6 weeks. That investment requires budget allocation, procurement, construction, and quality assurance across 36 state camps simultaneously. The government has mentioned a proposed 2 billion naira innovation fund tied to the reform, though it has not detailed how that fund will be allocated. 2 billion naira across 36 camps is approximately 55 million naira per camp. For reference, a standard classroom block in Nigeria costs between 15 and 30 million naira to construct. The numbers suggest that meaningful infrastructure improvement will require significantly more funding than has been publicly indicated. But I want to be clear about something important. Imperfect implementation is not the same as failure. If the 11 career streams produce even a partial improvement in posting relevance, if even 10,000 corps members per year get deployed to roles that genuinely match their qualifications instead of the current near-random system, if the security-sensitive deployment saves even one life that would otherwise have been lost to a posting in a dangerous area, then this reform will have produced something real, even if it falls short of the government's full ambition. The question is not whether the reform is perfect. The question is whether it moves the needle in a direction that makes NYSC more valuable to the young Nigerians who are required to go through it. What every Nigerian family should watch for. Here is exactly what to watch as this reform moves from announcement to implementation. These are the 4 signals that will tell you whether this is a genuine transformation of NYSC or a rebranding exercise. The first signal is the NYSC Act amendment. Watch for when the Attorney General of the Federation actually introduces the bill to amend the NYSC Act in the National Assembly. That introduction, the timeline for its passage, and whether public hearings are conducted will tell you how seriously the government is treating the legal foundation of this reform. If the Act is not amended within 6 months, none of the structural changes can be fully implemented legally. The second signal is the Employer Partnership Announcement. Watch for the government to publish a list of confirmed employer partners in all 11 career streams across the 36 states. If that list is not published before the first batch of corps members registers under the new system, the skills-based deployment promise is ahead of the reality.
The third signal is the camp infrastructure budget. Watch for a specific budget line in the 2027 Appropriation Act for NYSC camp infrastructure upgrades. If the money is not there, the 6-week camp program will be conducted in facilities designed for 3 weeks. That is not a minor inconvenience. That is a fundamental delivery problem. The fourth signal is the allowance review. Watch for any government statement about a timeline for reviewing the 77,000 naira monthly allowance in line with current inflation. The government has been silent on this. If that silence continues through 2027, it tells you that the reform is designed to change the experience of NYSC without increasing its cost. And in a country where core members currently struggle to feed themselves on their existing allowance, a more demanding 6-week camp with no additional financial support is a policy that asks more from young Nigerians without giving them more in return.
Here is the honest summary. The NYSC reform approved on June 29, 2026 is the most significant change to the scheme in its 53-year history. The 11 career streams, the skills-based deployment, the civilian leadership, the security-sensitive posting, and the Adire uniform are all real changes that address real documented problems with the old system. But the NYSC Act has not yet been amended. The camps do not yet have the infrastructure for 6-week programs. The employer network does not yet exist at the scale required. The allowance has not changed, and the implementation timeline has not been clearly communicated to the millions of Nigerian families who need to plan around it. This reform deserves cautious optimism, not unconditional celebration. It deserves your attention and your questions, not just your applause. Because the distance between a good policy announcement and a genuinely transformed institution is measured in budget lines, employer partnerships, camp infrastructure, and whether the young Nigerians going through the new system actually come out better equipped for Nigerian life than the generations before them. That is the standard to hold this reform to, not what it promises, what it delivers. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what the NYSC reform actually means for your family, share it with one Nigerian parent or graduate who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to Post Nigeria HQ, and tell me in the comments, do you think this reform will actually work, or is it another Nigerian government announcement that will struggle in implementation? I will see you in the next one.